Instead of using rockets for your elytra, use slow-falling arrows instead. And did you know that studded armor used to be in the game? And these are 47 Minecraft item facts that you maybe missed. And hey, as you can see from this number, we're coming up on 6 million subscribers. So if you haven't already, check that sub button below. It's free, and it helps out a ton. This fact will save you a lot of experience, because while we normally rename our items one at a time, it turns out that if you put a stack of 64 name tags into an anvil, then for the low cost of 1 experience level, you can surely rename all of them. Which is my favorite way of getting a bunch of name tags changed into dinner bones so that I can have those to keep my mobs around. If you have an efficiency 5 shovel, you're doing it wrong. Or I should say you're doing overkill, because really, an efficiency 4 diamond or netherite shovel is already fast enough to instantly mine every shovelable block. So by going above and beyond to try and get yourself an efficiency 5, it's really pointless. So really stick to efficiency 4 and save your extra levels for silk touch or something.
This mob will not die, because it's possible for mobs to hold the totem of undying and still be resurrected upon death. Even the sound effect plays, but the animation does not appear, though if you give a totem to a fox to hold, it'll at least have some particles to show for it.
If you were to fish up an item with a fishing rod, it normally flies up to you, but it turns out that if you step to the side, the item's still flying, and in fact it'll just completely pass you by, which I guess makes sense, but it's still a funny sight to see from this angle. And at this point, would it be fly fishing or fish flying? I have no clue. When they were first added in, shears were originally supposed to be used to defuse TNT, but it didn't make it into the final version, which I think is a shame. It would have been fun to carry around a pair of shears the next time they are doing TNT combat, but I guess a water bucket could do the job just as well, and for only 1 extra iron ingot.
This is the deadliest elytra in Minecraft, and not because of the elytra itself, but rather the firework rockets we use, since if you add firework stars to these rockets when crafting, you can still use them for flight, but you'll take damage as well, proving Icarus wasn't the only one to fly too close to the sun. So if you rightfully don't want to fly with these rockets, there is another way to reach liftoff.
Which sounds crazy, but if you hit yourself with a slow-falling potion arrow like this, and then launch up with a Riptide Trident, then that potion effect's gonna keep you at a 45-degree angle long enough to reach the stars. And then, after 11 seconds when the arrow's potion effect wears off, you'll be able to launch off with your elytra and have a pretty decent takeoff while you're at it. Which is good, because otherwise I can't think of another reason to shoot yourself with an arrow like this. If you compare the loading animation for a crossbow when you're in first person in Bedrock and in Java, you notice that the difference that the Bedrock plays more to the side while the Java happens in the middle. If you use the /item replace command to get a bone in the head slot, then once you wear a bone as a helmet, it's coded in as an Easter egg that it'll appear in the player's mouth, making Steve look more like a dog with a bone in its mouth. And really, there's so many Easter eggs that are coded in for the item replace command, it's worth trying out to see which ones are your favorites. This is the most detailed texture that Mojang's ever added to Minecraft, or that they kind of added. See, in the Infinite Snapshot for the April Fool's edition, there was a joke feature called a very fine item, and this item had a very fine texture of 64 by 64 pixels, which is a lot more than the 16 by 16 that we're used to. And while it's definitely not a realistic Minecraft texture like we're used to, at least the text is readable. That's gotta be something.
You probably know you can power a jukebox with redstone, but how about using a jukebox to power your redstone? Strange as it sounds, if you place a comparator facing out of a jukebox, the block will output a signal strength the same as the ID of the disk. So disk 11, for example, would give a redstone signal of 11, which is about all that disk 11 is good for, let's be honest.
Alright, pop quiz. Which one of these is coal and which one is charcoal? Well, when it was first added in, it was nearly impossible to tell the difference, considering that charcoal had the same texture as coal, and it wasn't until a few updates later that charcoal would get its own texture like this. But really, they both burn for the same amount of time and they have the same use, so there wasn't much of a drawback for getting them confused. Although I guess it would have been confusing to try and stack both of these together in a chest.
Crafting a boat out of obsidian sounds safe, but it's actually stupid, since as we see in the April Fool's snapshot called the Love and Hugs update, crafting one of these obsidian boats is only good for you sinking down to the bottom of the ocean. Funny, sure, but definitely not my first choice for sailing. Now, if only these could float on lava.
When Minecraft first added in its music discs, there were 2 songs that were added to the game, those being 13 and Cat. And for my money, one of those is a lot more enjoyable to listen to than the other, but I think it's interesting that they added in something as avant-garde as 13 this early. But I'm sure that all the theorists are happy that they've been able to look into the lore for this long.
Splash bottles of water aren't useless, you're just using them wrong. But if you were to throw one of these water bottles at yourself or a friend who's on fire, it'll actually extinguish them, making this a cheap way for some quick relief in the nether. And more importantly, it means that bottle you accidentally brewed up wasn't a total waste.
If you look closely, you'll notice that the chest that's inside of the chest bow isn't the same chest as the one that's inside of the minecart, but rather the chest texture that shows in the chest bow is 12 by 12 pixels, while the one in the actual block is 14 by 14. But I guess that just goes to show that those 2 extra pixels weren't all that necessary, because I didn't even notice.
Here's how an axolotl can be an infinite water source, since in Bedrock Edition, it's possible to capture a fish or axolotl in an empty bucket. So you could use this to get an infinite amount of water for your buckets. Just capture the fish mob, place it down, then then recapture it. Rinse, repeat, and there you have it.
In Bedrock Edition only, if you were shot by a tipped arrow that you blocked with a shield, while that would deflect the direct damage that you get from the arrow, you would still get the potion effect from the tipped arrow, which is a bit confusing. But if you think about it, we made these arrows using lingering potions. Maybe some of that lingering effect still exists. And that'd be why if you blocked it, you're still gonna get that potion effect. Sorry.
You can grow kelp on almost any solid block, and the reason this works is based on real life, since kelp actually absorbs its nutrients directly from the water, instead of having roots like a regular plant.
Never buy this from a villager, because even though the Woodland Mansion Explorer map might sound like a useful item to get, it could be a ripoff, since as a result of the world generation, there could be times that you buy this map for the cartographer, but the Explorer map doesn't actually show where the structure does exist, but rather where it would have existed if the generation didn't mess up. And really, it's not that useful to get a map that tells me where a Woodland Mansion would have been when I was really hoping to find where one actually is. I think I'd rather just use my eyes for this. Of all the tools in Minecraft, the pickaxe is the only one that doesn't have a right-click function, since we can use a hoe to till soil, a shovel to create pathland, we can use an axe on our copper blocks, and shears for, well, shearing. The pickaxe is really the odd one out, and I don't think it's gonna get a use feature anytime soon, since frankly, I don't even know what that would be.
What was the first item in Minecraft? While something like the apple has a texture dating back to before the game's release, it was actually the item arrows that was first added to the Java Edition survival test, and you could fire these by pressing the tab button. And for a bonus fact, skeletons could even fire a special purple arrow.
Let me introduce you to the wonderful world of ice bomb parkour, because in the Minecraft Education Edition, it's possible to create this secret item called an ice bomb, which is a projectile similar to an egg, but if you throw it at water, you're able to use it for parkour as well, which is a really fun feature. It's a shame that it's only stuck to this education lab. Of all the items in Minecraft, there's only one that has the word blocks in its name that isn't an actual block. And of course, that would be the music disc for the track, well, blocks. But that's also why it sticks out like a sore thumb when you type in the word block into the creative menu. Obviously, one of these is not like the others. Here's how to smelt your logs into charcoal without ever needing a furnace. Since if you were to go into a crafting table and put those 3 logs towards a campfire, then once you place down that campfire and break it, you'll be left with anywhere from 2 to 4 pieces of charcoal. And sure, it does take 1 piece of charcoal to get the whole thing rolling, but it's hard to say this isn't a whole lot faster. And once you've done this trick once, you'll have enough charcoal left over to keep doing it again and again. If you were to tweak the game so that a panda eats the spyglass item, then since this obviously wasn't intended, when it takes a bite out of the spyglass, it creates the missing texture particles, which would explain these purple and black icons that you see here. And really, I don't blame Mojang for never coding in eating particles for the spyglass.
Here's how to get a pet trident. If you have a loyalty enchanted trident and you throw it, it'll follow you until it goes into your inventory. But if you fill your inventory after throwing it, it can't return, so it just hovers around the player like this. You can even do this with multiple tridents, creating quite the hectic sight. Look closely, you might be able to spot the difference in these textures. And no, it's not just that one has a fish and the other doesn't, but actually the bucket texture in this sprite is 1 pixel lower than the original. And this is supposedly intentional, since the artist Japper claims it's due to the weight of the fish.
This exclusive item is only found in Education Edition, since when you use the camera item or entity, you're able to get yourself the exclusive photo item, which is handy since that game doesn't have a screenshot function. And you can even put the item inside of an item frame, which I think looks great. Definitely a lot better than some custom map art.
Don't feed your parrot a cookie, which is a lesson even Mojang had to learn, since when the parrot was first added to the game, you could use cookies to tame them. However, cookies are actually toxic to parrots in real life, so the code was changed to give them a fatal poison effect instead, reflecting the real world fact.
This might look like a magic wand, but it's actually a sparkler. And the way that we get this is by mixing together chloride and magnesium with a stick in the Education Edition. And actually using different kinds of chloride could give you different colors, such as calcium chloride for an orange one, or tungsten chloride for a green one. And unfortunately, while these give off particles, they don't actually give off any light, meaning these are really more of a party trick than anything useful. Stop using bone meal. Instead, you gotta use super fertilizer. Strange as it may seem, this is actually an item that Mojang's added to Minecraft. And to even get this, we'll need to mix together ammonia and phosphorus in a lab table. But from that point, this behaves a lot like old bone meal used to, where we can grow our plants and trees right up to maturity just like that. But it's a lot harder to farm than regular bone meal, so that's gotta be the drawback. This isn't a magic potion, but you might think it was, because when Bedrock Edition first added in honey bottles to the game, they had an exclusive texture that was different from the Java Edition. But in the beta phases of the game, it was changed to actually match the same texture, which is unfortunate. I actually like how this looks a lot, but I guess it makes sense that the whole glass bottle wouldn't get changed to a yellow texture, so it was eventually changed for parity.
It's possible to enchant a recovery compass, but only for a cruel joke. If you have a Curse of Vanishing book, you can attach it to your recovery compass in an anvil, but obviously this wouldn't do you much good, considering that the compass would disappear on death, and then you couldn't use it to find the rest of your stuff anyway, but it might make for a good prank to play on your friends.
What's more deadly, a wither rose or a magma block? joke? Well, while a Wither Rose might seem scarier, as you can see from this comparison, they actually both deal the same amount of damage at the same time. But if you hold down the sneak key, you can avoid taking any damage from the magma block, which I'd argue makes the Wither Rose at least a little bit more deadly.
This isn't leather armor, but actually it's called studded armor. This unused armor set only exists within the data for the items.png image in the game's files, and these specific sprites were ripped directly from Notch's old game, Legend of the Chambered 2, but they were removed before armor was ever implemented, making it just an Easter egg.
This fishing rod could be a deadly weapon, since back in old forms of PvP, before the combat update in 1.9, it was possible to use a fishing rod's bobber to stun your enemy and then hit them with a couple of combos with your sword, and that'd be why if you're on a legacy PvP server, you'd see these fishing rods going around. This is the worst piece of armor that's ever been added to Minecraft, but that's because it was a joke. See, in the so-called trendy update from Minecraft's April Fools, there was this item that was called the ankle monitor, and then if you put it on, it functioned much like the curse of binding. You'd never be able to take it off. And it also applied the slowness effect, making it a lot worse than those curse of binding boots you found anyway. Oh, and not to mention a bunch of annoying messages happening in your chat.
You've likely heard the cat music disc, but did you know there's a secret dog music disc as well? If not, I don't blame you, it's hard to find. Exclusively on the Legacy Console Edition, there was an extra dog track that played at the end of the cat music disc, meaning the cat music disc in that version was the longest disc in the game.
If you're playing in normal difficulty and you sit inactive within a minecart, then no matter how long you sit there, your hunger bar will never deplete, which essentially gives you a way to never starve to death, but it's pretty boring, so I'd rather just go get some food and go about it that way.
If you were to place a sign while on a ladder, then you'll have frozen time, and now you'll remain mid-air on that ladder without having to hold the sneak key. But worth mentioning that this only works on single player, since on a multiplayer server you can't pause the game this way.
Here's how to completely ruin a book and quill, because if you were to take the item inside of an anvil and then give it a new name before you write anything inside, then from that point you can't write anything inside the book. So if you want to rename your manifesto, you should instead wait until after you've written something inside of it and then rename it that way. Then it'll still function normally.
If Minecraft clocks are too expensive, here's how to get one without crafting it. In Java Edition, after unlocking the recipe, all you need to do is check the recipe book to see the clock sprite. And there you go, it works just the same, and this one didn't cost 4 gold and some redstone.
This item never made it into Minecraft, but if you check back within the game's files for snapshot 19W34A, there was a texture for the crystallized honey item that was added to the game. But when snapshot 19W42A came out, that same texture got removed. And apparently this was because, according to one of the Minecraft gameplay developers, it was never actually intended to come out in the game, but it was still fun to get a couple of theories and ideas surrounding them before they were eventually removed anyway.
Be careful wearing an elytra on a ladder, because it's actually possible to start gliding while climbing a ladder. All you have to do is press sneak and then jump. At that point, you can start falling down the ladder, and if you look down too much, you'll even fall fast enough to take fatal fall damage. But really, if you have an elytra, why are you even using a ladder anyway?
The piercing enchantment could be a lot more useful than you think it is, since if you get this on your weapon, then it actually gives you a way to save back on your arrows. Since, as you can notice here, if we shoot a projectile into a wall without the piercing enchantment, we're not able to pick it back up. But with the piercing enchantment, then it actually works, giving us an economical enchantment that I'm happy to see. This arrow was never supposed to exist in Minecraft. So, how did we get it? Well, by using the give command, you're able to get yourself some custom arrow variants like this one. And there you go, potion variants of arrows that we were never supposed to have can function just the same, even if there's no potion associated with it. And I think this would open up a whole new slew of custom PvP maps that you should try out in the future. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?